Observing cycles, sharing insights, and solving problems together by combining historical, climate, food, and economic data so you can make informed decisions as we shift into a new era. Here's what was, this is what's coming. Our world is never going back to 2019, so what will the new era look like? And most importantly, what is immediate that will affect the pocketbook and the outlook into next year so we can all get ready? Thank you for joining. I'm your host, David DuByne. Right along here with Ransom Godwin tonight, and welcome wherever you are on this beautiful blue planet. Another day of breath to experience the reality around us. We've seen everything uptick. This is what you should have been getting ready for. This set of circumstances starting to unveil itself as we see it. China has lost, I would say, most of its early rice crop. They have two crops of rice, but at least 15% of all the total production of Chinese rice has just been lost. And these floods are just once in the 1,000-year range. They're unloading the Three Gorges Dam so fast so it doesn't overtop that it's flooding everything down river. And the crop losses everywhere you look. So suddenly there's this scatter wave. And, you know, it's so interesting for me that the same information about all these cities getting flooded, just enormous crop losses across China, was like Friday of last week, and then we saw what happened this weekend. And I'm like, are those two tied? Do they know the Chinese are just going to be just voracious out there trying to get food for their citizens at any cost? And this is, you know, the next uptick. Everything has just shifted because of the amount of food that will or will not be available across the planet. And everybody's looking at the money. What happens to my dollar? It's a central bank digital currency. That's the bait and switch. What I wanted to talk about tonight also with Ransom is these real world assets and how they're going to take a piece of land or gold or a house and convert it into a digital contract. And then that will be worth something that you can trade to others, real world assets. And now these natural asset corporations, where corporations actually buy land and hold it off, and then they digitize that as well. We're missing the whole thing there. They have you distracted on your dollar, turning it from a Federal Reserve note into a new Fed-issued dollar. Everywhere you look, there's these massive changes inbound. I think we're finally here. Another X-flare going to be ripping through the planet. It should be here. Let me see. I have the graphic pulled up. On the 21st, well, it's actually the 20th here because we're on Greenwich Mean Time, so we're about -5, so it would be 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. On the 20th of July, coming up in just a couple days. Did I say September? I was looking at a note there. Anyway, it's a direct hit on Earth. Now, will it be that much above? It's only an X1 something. Extra flares coming down, massive amounts of comets coming through, an enormous amount of meteors and meteorites, just long, really, really long duration. What's going on with the atmosphere that these are allowed to come through? Are we coming into a more debris-ridden area of space? Is this because the gas giants are lining up in a square behind us? And gravitationally, forget the electromagnetism. We're just going to strictly gravity as we understand it. With all those magnetic effects, would it pull that directly into the path of the Earth? And is that what we're experiencing as we go through this square? This October, and this same squaring of the planets hasn't been seen since 79 AD. So you really have to wonder. Think of a perfect square of Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune. Then we have the sun, and then the Earth will go right through the center of those two different magnetic fields. Now imagine if that's dragging stuff in, i.e. space debris, rock, then we might have that pulled right into the front of our Earth. And that seems to be what's happening right now as well. the Hungatongi eruption, that water is starting to come out of our atmosphere, and these massive floods that we're seeing across the planet, absurd upsets in the entire hydrological system. And that's just a big word to say water, rainfall. What rainfall is, well, that's our food, that's our crops. So on the world stage, it looks like, I don't know if it's the distraction because the food, the availability to grow food, all the disasters happen. I'm not sure. But anyway, Ransom's joining us here. I was waiting for him to give me the signal. Now, I did want to talk about all these things that are happening here and a huge amount of like, why are there train derailments? You got one windmill off of Martha's Vineyard, like just one blade breaks, just one. And they got to close the entire island off for one fiberglass blade. Like, what is happening? It is full on, full court press for like 1,000 things happening at the same time, which tells me only one thing. That the events that are coming in are going to be so disruptive because of electromagnetic and also gravitational inbound objects. The changes of perceived reality because of electromagnetic changes as we come through this squaring of the gas giants in October of 2024. You've noticed an uptick of intensity in the last week, possibly two. The closer we get into this squaring, the more intense it's going to get. And we have from now to October. And when you could say this last 4 years was like intense, you're going to roll that up into the next 4 months. And again, if there's any, gravitational effects on the tides as well. So imagine if the tides double or triple during this time when we come into this squaring, even if we're just a week or even 3 days either side of the October 24th event of this year. Even if it was 3 days before and 3 days after and the tides were 2 or 3 times higher, our infrastructure is going to be very heavily damaged with that much extra weight and water and speed of water. The entire scatter wave is being thrown at us all at the exact same time because the awareness is growing. Something with the awareness of understanding of our planet, or just intuitively feel it, as we come into the second magnetic field, something is starting to happen on the planet, to us as a species, to us observationally as a species. These controllers oversee with these puppet strings, you're seeing through the illusion too quickly because of the electromagnetic field change. And before you can even understand and grasp that and start to utilize it and be like, wow, I'm starting to see through this, bam, there's another, it's an overwhelming story to never allow you to understand why you're feeling or seeing these things. It's just an overwhelm. That just gets lost in the energetic tidal wave. They need to stay one step ahead of this. And when I say them, I'm talking about the controllers all the way from the central bank into the corporations, the food producers, and everything in between, the logistic, anything that moves or controls food or commerce on the planet at the highest levels, from the Bank for International Settlements all the way down to the Fortune 10 companies and the Fortune 50s. And that leadership. What's above the aristocratic class? These cycles are here. They're back again. People know that it's here. It's going to be, well, it's starting to be disruptive already. If you haven't seen that, it's incredibly disruptive. Something has actually changed. Like the physical, what you would call soup around you has shifted. Did you notice that? And the soup is going to continue to shift more as we come into October. So Ransom, I appreciate you joining me. I don't know what you're seeing out there, but I feel that there is definitely a shift, like literally, like our reality ripped at, and where that rip is in the middle, you can almost step into that or see through it. It's a tearing.
Right. You know what's so funny is last week when I came on, I basically predicted, I mean, not specifically, but like the first thing I said when I came on last week was, I had been watching the debates and then watching the news coverage of the debates. And that's why I said, watch, right? This now until election is going to be some of the craziest things you can ever think about that'll blow your mind. And I said that last week, and that's exactly happening. The world is changing. And that's another thing we talked about last week is you're just going to wake up one day and everything's going to be different. And it's just going to be like that one day you notice that it's different. Now, that kind of happened last week on Saturday. And I happened to have a live show that day. So I was, I was live on revolution.radio, and I had a whole show planned out about other topics. And the event happened. We'll just call it that so we don't get too much into it because I know there's a lot of weird stuff going on about it. But everything that I sat here and told my family while we were watching it, all of that has come out in the next, days and weeks. Like I called the whole thing. And not to mention, how often I talk to you about how this whole political genre of television, I guess you can call it, and news is like WWE. And tonight I just watched Hulk Hogan rip off his shirt at the convention there in true fashion, man. And it's like, in the background, all kinds of people are dying, like Lou Dobbs. You remember that guy from, Newhart show with the Daryl and his other brother Daryl? That guy's. So like all of these faces are leaving the planet. And we can get into that, but not too specifically because, a lot of people listen to the show know that there's been a big changeover rate. Let's just put it that way in the last several years. And that trend is going to continue. And it's going to be completely shocking. In the last week on that day, I think on the same day as the event, several Gen X people that are supposed to be celebrities also keeled over for one reason or another. And then, you have the escalation of everything where they're telling you where everything is going to go just by predictive programming. So we know it's going to get kind of, it's going to get spicy soon, right?
Hey, Ransom, could I say that
Yeah.
World Wrestling Federation for the masses is politics.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's old school. That shows you that you're old, man, because it's been the WWE for a long time. I think they got tired of competing with the World Wildlife Federation or something, so they changed it over to WWE a while back. But yeah, I never really ever watched none of that stuff, but I watched it enough to see the goofy production of tribalism and how they can, motivate. And I hate to say this, but mid-range IQs to really get involved in it emotionally with all the lights and the crowd and I'm seeing that tonight. And no offense to one side or the other, I'm not saying that because actually, in my opinion, this might be the best outcome that we were going to get in years in the direction things were going, because I have a feeling that we were about to go face first into multiple war fronts, and I just don't think that's going to happen in the same way now. It's going to still happen, but it has to be rearranged, and some of the backup plans have to be used, if you get my drift. And that's what you're seeing in Germany. They're going to host long-range Tomahawk missiles. Now, they don't have any enemies to speak of in reality near them, so that's just an antagonistic move on their part. And this is one that I thought was really stand out right here that might change the world big time. And I don't know if you agree, but Saudi Arabia threatens to sell off its European debts if the G7 confiscates any Russian assets. And then you got, the plethora of where AI is going. It's nonstop. It's going to be invasive. You were kind of talking about that. Speaking of, like, how are you going to travel anywhere when the new cars, whether they're self-driving or not, are going to be constantly snitching on you, on your text messages, on your face? Did you get tired? Are you altered while you're driving? Things like that. And driving habits. So they're going to nanny state you with how fast you're going. But this was the real mind blower: automated DUIs, right? The new AI-powered in-vehicle camera technology that'll assess a driver's intoxication. That could mean anything now. And, just the creepy idea that your car is going to go out of its way to keep track of you and spy on you. That's the ultimate in the nanny state. That's exactly what we've been talking about, from chips under your skin to the phone in your back pocket, the tablet your children play with, the television that your family surrounds, to the all of the utilities based yeah, I'm losing my mind here. I forgot words. The like your
You were
stove and
going
your
tracking because I rented a
appliances.
car one time and I was driving back from Atlanta, about a 4 hour drive, and it was, rented it later at night. And the start, I wasn't really, I was sort of tired, but I was like, it'll be, just focus and turn on the cruise control, get back. But it would tell me to pull over for a rest break about every 30 minutes. That's crazy
Wow.
because it was monitored. I didn't even want that kind of car. But then all of a sudden I got my car going, you need to stop for a rest break. You should stop for a rest break. You need to, I was like, what the hell? In the car, no less. So it was monitoring my eyeballs and pupils like they have with some of the mining equipment. That's scary because that was a rental car, and I sure as hell didn't sign up for that in my rental car. I didn't want that. I want a car to drive home. Thank you.
Right. And that kind of demonstrates the point I've been trying to make. From your TV to your car to your phone to your television, all of these new technologies, like judging what your mood is, pushing on your heartstrings, trying to get you to think this or think that, or make you believe that this is the reality that's happening or not. All of that's going on. It's a hardcore technological propaganda war going on right now. And it's almost as if, you can really only trust your eyes in person at a location at any given time. And then your eyes are going to start bugging you out because things are going to radically change. Here's a article from
Well, wait a second, Ransom. Could I say that?
yeah.
It's just impulses of electricity that are transmitting either what you hear or what you see into your brain to be decoded. So if that's a manipulated field in itself, then with the reality you're seeing or decoding, like the suit you're in to decode reality around you, that is being messed with at the moment. The input into that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just like the first layer of it. They have gone so far as to be able to program and trigger things in minds. And a good example of that, if you remember, probably 10 years ago or more, they had the Pokemon craze. And, they had the cartoon that came on and had a specific flicker rate that caused a certain percentage of children to just start seizuring and, clam up. Well, that was an accident. That was purely by accident. However, that technology that uses what that did exists in many different forms, and one of those is Li-Fi. And a lot of people, neglect to talk about or realize the reality of Li-Fi. And Li-Fi is light instead of like the internet. It's not wireless connection. It's coming right through the light, right in your eyeballs. Now, if you can make a bulb that does that and projects the internet out, which is a thing. You can look it up. There's various companies doing that now, and they probably perfected it in the last 10 years. You can have internet in an entire building with only the light that's available in the building. So if that's true for the machines that could pick that up, now you're talking about integrating the body and, the technology together. It will be picking up all of these inputs, just like you were talking about, from the very first layer of just the light going into your eye. But also on top of that, specifically coded information that can be transmitted directly into your brain. And this is going to be spread out all over the place in various different places you wouldn't think it would be. Like someone sitting at the DMV that becomes unhappy with how long it's taking, or maybe it's taking too long for his number to come up. And, it wouldn't be unexpected in the near future for a robotic individual or a police escort to come out and ask you what's the matter with you and why you're doing that. Now, if you think about the event that just happened, that could be one of many pretexts to say that this kind of technology needs to be installed everywhere, from the CCTV cameras to your computer, laptop at home, to your phone, etc. We've talked about that. And here, the former Joint Chiefs of the Chairman predicts 1/3 of the U.S. military will be replaced with robots in the next 15 years. And it actually says 10 to 15. But I'm going to tell you, that's already happening, and it's going to be happening faster. And the reason for that is because we're about to start having large kinetic wars that deplete the amount of healthy, fertile young men of every different kind of person on this planet. And then they're going to just fill those spots with killbots, which will be creating more and more death, but not in the form of troops. So you can see how it'll be easy to go to Congress and say, hey, we're losing too many American boys over there. We need another nonstop investment of billions of dollars into this robotics. Now, imagine if they got the amount of money that Ukraine got, like some robotics company, say, I don't know, Boston Dynamics or maybe Elon Musk, and they got the same amount of money that Ukraine's getting from our government, but that steady supply that's going into these proxy wars instead went into robotics to build machines, which I think is going to be the next phase of industry in all of the first world countries. And they're pretty much, telling you that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, let's get into the woo-woo, because, you were talking about what's going on like a cosmic level. Are we about to go into a time where humans, hit that singularity also, and all of a sudden things make sense to us? It's possible for telepathy now through, think about that too. Not even biological telepathy, but with the technology available today, in a few short years, not for the surveillance state, but even on the enjoyment level. Watch it. And mark my words, if you live not too long, you'll see some kind of peripheral sold that allows you to experience telepathy. But let's get past that. What if we're going to that point anyway? Wouldn't it be best for the controllers to create a web of artificial intelligence and the metaverse, so to speak, of fake realities, a dissimulation to always be tricking the lower class while they build their technocratic empire in the background? And it might not be only human beings that are going to fall victim to this. Saturday, I was talking about the various different hominids that there are and how it's very possible that each one of them had their own type of speech. And we know that by other animals like meerkats and, et cetera, that have thousands of words that are individual sounds that mean an individual idea. So that whole idea that humans are the only ones that can talk back and forth, that's been disproven and debunked. But they're not the only animals. Elephants and these other really smart animals are now learning things like we thought were only for us, which is like giving names to things or specific individuals, which we thought was a completely human thing. It turns out not so much. Dolphins, elephants, and other animals, bats even, are using specific words for specific individuals and specific ideas. And this is now being found all in the animal kingdom. Now, this comes at the same time as that the sci-fi idea of your dog talking to you is now becoming a reality. And there are companies out there about to sell that. And just in time for the great die-off, I wanted you to think about this, to add this in the mix. After that, they're going to know how to promote the idea of promoting human beings' lifespans through genetic engineering, and not only genetic engineering, but new pharmaceuticals, just like this study's talking about the granny supermodel mouse that they got with a drug that they gave it that increased its lifespan by 25% if it was a female and 22% if it was a male. And, if people don't know why that's impressive, it's because they've been playing around with this idea for a long time using lab rats. But that lab rats eventually goes to human testing. So this isn't that far away. And matter of fact, I think they have already perfected that. But now they are figuring out how to meter it. So there are people out there that have HIV, and they figured out how to meter their life by giving them specific amount of drugs that keeps them alive every day. The same for diabetic people. And now, after the great die-off here, I think they are going to offer what's left of the human beings an ability to have a longer life, except for, I bet there will be a catch, like no more children for you. And the state will then decide when, where, and who gets to have children, because people are living longer due to the pharmaceutical industry being able to meter life finally. This is a mind-blowing idea.
And wait a second, and grow food too. We have to have an abundant oversupply of food.
Right.
That's a major catch also.
Well, yeah, it's just the whole thing is coming right together where the elite will be able to meter everything, and I mean everything. We've talked about how they're about to meter the water. They already meter the food. That's why your food prices stay static no matter how good or bad the country's doing. They continually go up. Back to you, Bob, with the weather.
And today, there's just a slight chance of thunderstorms, 30%. So maybe take an umbrella, don't take an umbrella, whatever. You're still hiring me for making a 50% call because I'm the best weatherman ever. And then, in 100 years from now, I'm very precise. Yeah, like, sheesh, come on. Yeah, these changes that we're seeing. Now take everything into consideration that we're talking about, all these levels of it, and put each one of those on a shelf. And, how many layers is this deep that it goes into? But it comes back down to knowing that the cycle had onset. And then during this time of, amplification into the beginning of the cycle, and eventually we'll hit that center point, and then we'll roll out of it into an entirely new system. But you wouldn't want to stop the old system that worked incredibly well, like a well-oiled machine, as they would say. You would never stop that prematurely and just lose all that easiness of implementing a control system across the planet. Like, you wouldn't just stop and shift because you wanted to. They're stopping and shifting right now because the energetic frequency of our entire solar system and our star is changing. They have to. For those last 70 years or whatever after World War II, that was, just cruising along in the same magnetic field, and that system worked for then. It doesn't work like that anymore. That's why the shift is here. There's something that is coming that was going to disrupt or alter previous entire systems of what you consider infrastructure. Dams, which are now crumbling and breaking on several rivers in the United States just within weeks of each other, that's unheard of. Like, literally overtopping and washing away of dams because of too much rain. And rail cars, and Ransom sent me a video of another corn train going over. 30 cars spill off the tracks, full of corn, obviously. But it's just nonstop train derailments as well, as if the earth's being pulled or tugged, and those rails are going out of kilter for a little while. And a train comes along and it didn't snap back together. There's differences in the crust currently. There's earth cracks. You would know the cycles here. And the reason I'm telling you is Lake Victoria. I was following this story because I'm very sure that the Sahel is going to get greener. So Lake Victoria, southern Sudan, it started to get a lot more noticeable rain in 2019, but they just broke a 128-year record for rainfall filling up Lake Victoria. Like, see, these cycles were known. Once these start, that means that this and this and then this will happen. But see, I don't have that record exactly. But these records exist of what will happen in the Lake Victoria era, and I don't care if it was the Aksum Kingdom or the Kingdom of Ghana that was taking meticulous records. As far back as it goes, somebody knows the cycle. When Lake Victoria starts to fill back up after it almost completely dries out, what used to be the base of an African mega lake some 6,000 or 7,000 years prior. It's going to go through the 6,000-year cycle. It's going to be totally full, like a Great Lake as big as ours, Lake Michigan. And then it's going to completely dry out into a little tadpole pond here. And then once that tadpole pond, super small, like a little area that frogs can live in, that's about it. Once it comes to that low and it starts to grow again, that is your signal that some event is going to occur directly after that. But it's not just here. For some reason, in the last 2 months, it started to happen everywhere. I really mean everywhere. So many that it can't keep up on how many record floods there are across both hemispheres occurring exactly now. So what's next? The event is here. So whatever these elitists and globalists and banks are preparing for, the event is here and started now in earnest, because there's so many things all overlapping, so intense. If you were looking for a signal of intensity that, wow, you can't even deny it anymore. You really can't. We're at that point with all these floods across the planet. It's undeniable that there is just record floods everywhere, on all the continents. Is it the water coming out from the Hunga Tonga eruption? I'm not sure myself if that would be exclusively just that. But whatever's in play, as we're already past the point of no return on it, natural cycle-wise. So the crop losses come next. Then what? So speaking of that, a powerful derecho blast through the Midwest, leaving a trail of destruction. That was just today. The front was 500 miles wide at 105 miles an hour, going over the middle of the the middle of the cornfields in Iowa and Indiana. A 500-mile long storm, corn that's probably chest high, 105 miles an hour winds. And that has ripped through our grow belt. Now, remember, just 2 weeks ago, we had record floods down the Mississippi as well, over Missouri area. China lost their crop for the beginning of the year here. You know, I heard the news that they had to release and open all 9 gates at the Three Gorges Dam. And when they do that uncontrolled, and I mean full throttle, because the dam was about to overtop. The Three Gorges Dam was like, really, I had a kid that was like a couple of feet from overtopping, because every other dam system above that was completely inundated. They had a full year of rain in one day. I'll say that again. The higher up areas within China on that same dam system that come down to the Three Gorges Dam, that whole entire area received a year's worth of rain in one day. So every dam filled up beyond its capacity. They opened up all 9 gates, and the number of drowned are, government releases and says 60. The people living there say north of 100,000, because the dams opened too quick and they didn't warn anybody, and it was going up like, a foot every couple minutes. And just the amount of, you can clearly see that is another sign. So it doesn't matter which continent you go to, these same cultures that have mapped out all these different cycles through the last, at least 3,000 years. We're here again. Now it's time to change, because you can't let the people know. You can't let the people know. You see how all-encompassing it is, because I saw this meme, and it said you just paid 8.5% sales tax on fireworks to celebrate a war that you fought over 2% taxation. Right? So it's all about keeping you on the system. Whatever direction you move or get bent or pushed to, it always pushes you back onto the system. It's an illusion, the entire reality around. I'm surprised that anything moves through logistics anyway. And we've come to the point now where if you take a 30,000-foot view, the amount of lost infrastructure, the loss of faith in the infrastructure, the non-real grasping of tomorrow due to these extremes that we're seeing across the planet, the grains and the different types of foods growing, being dented heavily. And now we have so you have to, my whole thing is, which is first, second, and third? Okay, the food is going to be the most important thing, obviously. But coming into this squaring of the gas giants we haven't seen since 79 AD, that's a wild card in itself. We don't know what rolling through those different magnetic fields, pulling everything in a single direction, that we're going to, go through the middle of that. unknown what the effects would be, but are they overlapping? And at the same time, we come into the complete system shift. So I'm wondering which one's pushing which one? Is it the realization because the cycle's really intensified now where we're really going to start to get into the crop losses? I mean, the point where the people are going to be so angry how expensive food gets. And this is the point where governments have done their analysis from the acres planted, the acres lost, stranded crops that'll be there, flooded crops that were waiting in storage, things underwater, hopefully that maybe they'll get a couple percent yield out of. It seems like the world has crunched the numbers. And they understand right now about how much food there will be. And understanding the cycle that it would be more intense even next year. And just from the simple fact of Hunga Tonga and the moisture coming out, even next year, there will be even just as much, if not more, moisture coming out. Because most of the reports I was reading were saying around year 3 is when it starts to come back out of the atmosphere. Well, we are just at the beginning of it coming back out of the atmosphere. A few more years of this, 3 to 7 years. So put it into context, then is it somebody knows that we've crossed this point and all these other things need to start happening. But what I see at the end of it is whatever the restructuring will be, will still have you stuck into a system of voting and paying taxes. Staying on the ranch, if you will. There's not going to be a breakaway of a new system that's set up that doesn't have either. That's the trap of it all. You're choosing the system still to stay within that same control, which I find incredibly interesting. So walk me through it, and you know where we're coming to at the end of it, a new system. How much you think it has to be crop losses before a nation invades another nation just for the food only, strictly for the food? I don't know, Ransom, I'm trying to put them in order. Can you help me out?
I don't know if you saw that Twitter post I sent you, but it's a farmer from England explaining how that there's this group that basically came to them to pay them money not to grow things, and if they grew it, to just let it sit there and not feed their cows, not do anything with it. And they had a plan for 3 years of no food. Let me see if I can find that real quick and put it up. But basically he was talking about that they have pressured them through making the manure and fertilizer and all of that so expensive they can't do anything. And I watched the guy talking, and here's the quote: "The government has offered us a scheme whereby we get paid for not supplying food for 3 years. Don't believe farming and food supply is under attack." Listen to this guy, how he explains how the financial incentive is for the state to not grow any more food. And he talks about how you would get paid to grow bird seed and things for the bugs and the birds, but not for human consumption. And that's where we're at, where the governments of the world are even playing dirty to tell people not to even grow the food in the first place. Now, the only reason I could think of that you would push people to not grow food is if you were planning on some kind of, an event in which this is kind of like put options. Oh, did we lose a call here? Anyway.
No, you're still there.
Oh.
I just sent you a couple. I sent you a couple images of the planetary alignment, which I think would be understand. Those. Who had that information about the put options?
Well, it depends on which event you're talking about. But my only point...
right. Both of them, both of the biggest events in the last 50 years, both had put options as a one thing that is common amongst both of those.
Yeah. Well, I was just saying that. The connection I'm making is that if governments are paying farmers not to farm, or to farm but not to sell their produce, or to grow other things, or rewild, or sell their land to some kind of Pleistocene rewilding program, whatever the case is, or war, what you're doing basically is putting put options on the world's food supply. And that's kind of where I was going with that. So yeah, it's really strange how these things go down, where at the same time as there might be a production problem, you also see moves to, cripple the production at the same time.
Yeah, that is a terrible thing to think about. And those of you out there, if you're following the conversation, we put together show notes that are a weekly compilation of just 8 or 7 different bullet points from what we've been talking about and what we will talk about next hour. So we try to wrap that up into 8 bullet points, 7 bullet points for easy conversation starters. If you'd like to get on that mailing list for our show notes, you want to go over to oilseedcrops.org, and you'll see up at the top radio show. Click on that. It'll take you down into an opt-in box. Put your email in there, and we'll be happy to get those out to you. So I want to talk about NACs for a second. You might have heard about CBDCs. People are trying to, I should say central banks are trying to get what we consider sovereign national banks to issue, all coming off the Bank for International Settlements, connected systems that will be the future of money itself in terms of like digitized dollars. That's only the base layer there. Because if you can start to own the food, this is where it gets into, I don't know if you would say dark side or controlled side or non-human side. They create these things called national asset corporations. And a group of companies will come in and buy vast swaths of land. It could be agricultural land, could be forestry lands, could be dual usage, forest canopy lands, forest floor, farming, agriculture, dairy, fishing, anything. They'll come in and buy these vast swaths of land and completely take it off of usage for anybody to be on there. It's completely private land. It's king's land. They fence it off. Nobody's allowed in there. And then what they do is they digitize that, and then you're a partial owner of the plot. So the entire plot cannot be sold back again unless every last one of their issuance comes back in hand, and then they will be able to sell it. Otherwise, it is taken off of usage forever. So there you have something where they're taking usable farmlands or protein-producing lands or raw materials-producing lands and taking them offline forever. Hundreds of thousands, millions of acres. They could create shortages by doing this. So it's almost like we're having shortages when our shelves are full. It's like a purposeful buy of the land, digitize it, tokenize it, and remove it off. Yeah, so what Ransom said, pleistocene rewilding areas as an example, forest rehabilitation areas. Then on the other hand, you got Bill Gates who wants to cut down, I think he said 90 million acres of trees and bury them so the carbon isn't released out of the bark and the tree, the cellulose wood itself. And then they make these massive pits to build, like I say, to cut tens of millions of acres of trees down. So I was like, you guys, and here you are trying to reforest areas and rewild areas that are bought by these NACs and a corporation and holding companies own this, never to be seen again. Now it's in its infancy. What if it continues and then these NACs become the way that, and then almost all lands like the Bureau of Land Management and wild lands and federal lands and, state lands and all these things turn into private corporation lands. And really the only thing left would be what you consider your private property for a time. But imagine if they were able to take all public lands and all federal lands and all farmlands off line because they would own them and all the decision would be made amongst all the owners of all the national asset corporations or the NACs. Like I could buy one, me and Ransom, we could buy a 500 acre, what you would consider swamp area And then we'll take that and we'll say it's a natural ecosystem. But on the periphery edge of that one side over there, they're filming or they're farming, 50 acres of something. Or it's the edge of a wilderness habitat where people come in and go fishing. And they're allowed to frog gig in there sometimes once a year, twice a year. Like, we could buy that area, take it completely offline, fence it in. Nobody can come in there and do anything, not even fishing, nothing, completely offline. You can't farm there anymore. You can't fish there. You can't do a single thing. You can't cut a tree. You can't even use an acorn out of that area. Completely gone. And then we digitize that and we say, all right, well, it's worth $1 million. And then we split that thing off into 1,000 $10 pieces, or I don't know, or however you want to fractionalize that out. $1, one token, 1 million token issuance. And everybody can own a piece of that land. But the thing is, it has to remain private and offline for that to occur. There's no like dual usage of these NACs. They buy it, it's on the shelf. And enough of this keeps going on and on and on, then where does our usage for the land come for us to be able to grow food or actually look for energy resources? Water's an important thing. I don't know, man. It is, like you said, I really believe at the heart of it, like you said, they're purposefully taking everything offline, and they already know that this civilization couldn't be salvaged in its current form based on the things we are entering and the intensifications we're moving into, especially starting this year. I don't know, man. It seems a little quirky. I hope, did you find those two images I sent you of the squaring of the planets in Skype?
Yes, the one I have up right now is your comparison to 2024 to 79 AD.
Yeah, so put that in perspective. We're coming into the same electromagnetic change, whatever occurred back then to shift the Roman Empire and bring in a new religious era is happening right now again. So you put that into perspective, and then you look at the world the way it is with all the madness and the shift that's going. There's a massive change. And you're telling me those two are completely unrelated. I can't even believe remotely that you could not put the cause and effect, at least on a portion of today's change in the world. Not all, obviously, but a substantial portion, or 50% or a percentage, a large percentage of all these things you're seeing across the planet are related directly to what we're coming in through that magnetic field change right there. So I'll leave it back to you.
Yeah, how's that going to affect us? I've been doing a lot of studying into the Mayan and Aztec and other Central American, cultures, and knowing that they were taking different things to make them see the world in a different way. They had a different connection, so they were seeing it altered. And I ask you, is that not that much different than what's going on now? The difference is everybody's not on mushrooms now, seeing things. If you were looking at a guy wearing a jaguar costume with the skull of the jaguar on your head and you've ate a bunch of ayahuasca mushrooms and peyote, you're going to be seeing some altered spaces, right? But today it's a technological hallucination or a dissimulation, and that's what's going on. They have convinced people that the country is going one way or the other, but like I've always said, no matter who gets in office, the balance or the status quo always maintains. So you might not get the war that you want, but you're going to get a war. You might not get the guy that you want, but you're going to get a guy that does things. And everybody will come together for the emergencies that happen for the public. So you didn't see too much, well, there was a little actually, but this whole thing fit into their narrative that everybody's going to be fighting here in the United States or some kind of civil unrest between the people. And time after time, they keep trying to pull out these triggers. And the Americans, whether it's because we're lazy, we're too smart, maybe it's because we just don't believe it. Who knows the actual reason, but we don't fall for it. It maintains. And I think that's happening in a lot of the other Western world countries, and that's exactly why they were susceptible to the razzle dazzle. Look at the birdie over here while we change everything in the background. And then it only takes that one event, only one, to radically change the entire world. And I think that, the other day was one of those events, but it was a small event. It was just another trickle into the stream of change that's about to happen, and it's incremental. And I've been saying this for years, but it's weird to finally be in the year or the years where I see it all unfolding. I see all of the predictions I've made, all of the bad things, some of the good things coming out and happening. And we're getting to that point where, maybe you should reset. And there's different ways to do that. And what I mean by that is not reset along with their great reset, but literally reset your mind, reset your way of thinking, and see things in a new way. Imagine, and I know that you experience this because, like you, sometimes you just cut off the feed and you go and you deal with nature or your land or your private life, your business, your affairs. You got to deal with personal stuff, and then when you come back, don't you this is a question, do you realize how much things have changed from a little portion of time that you left the feed compared to like 10 years ago? You could go on vacation for 6 months and come back and everything would be relatively exactly the same, but now you can disconnect for a day and you're behind everybody on the planet of what happened. And I was watching that event live on one of the streams, and I kid you not, I thought it was an AI fake at first. I thought that can't be real. I'm not looking at that. That can't be real. And then, I flipped through the feeds everywhere, and sure enough, that is what's happening. That's what's capturing everyone's mind. But they're going to need everyone to forget that. So you can expect something even crazier in the next weeks, months, up until this election. But don't get it twisted. I'm not saying that, it's super doomsday or nothing. This literally happens every 4 years, but never to the extreme, I think, in the last sets of four. So like from 2008 to 2006, or let's just go to 2001 and then go up the election cycle and look how every 4 years the United States of America fundamentally changes, unrecognizable from the last administration, except for, like you put it earlier, wars, taxes, and scandal. Those three always stay there. And I think that that's because there's an entertainment factor to the way that they play the world against each other. They need that entertainment. And I myself am not a Christian, but I find it odd, or not odd, but the parable of Jesus when he's there with Barbarus, and they're asking the crowd, who do you want to string up on the pole there? And most of the people pick Jesus instead of a known murderer there. That's a guy that's murdered. So that's an analogy for exactly the way the environment is now. People would rather see strife as a form of entertainment than people doing good. And I know that a lot of people feel that in their life. But the thing is if you're just doing you and you're in your own business, those outside people can't really affect you. And you don't want to hang out with people that don't have the same goals as you do, right? So if you want to prep and you want to change things and make things positive and change over to a new kind of living, you're going to have to hook up with other people that do that too. And that's literally what I've been doing, for a while. I wanted to get into YouTube. I met people on YouTube. I wanted to get into growing food myself. I met those people. Anything that you want to do, there are people out there that are willing to connect in a community. And that's exactly the main thing that they've been trying to destroy, the main backbone of civilization that they have to conquer before they depopulate, before they make wars, before any of that. They have to demoralize the public and change it fundamentally. And that starts with the family, and then it goes out to the local neighborhood, and then the community, and then the nation as a whole. And that's where we're in trouble. There's so much division, so many crazy ideas, so many puppet strings in the background, that you basically have to cut everything off and be in your own little bubble, but still have your life transparent enough that you see the outside world changing and be able to react to that in real time. But a lot of it, people are, joke with me that, I predict a lot of things right on the money, like from day to day, but more than that over my lifetime. And it's not that I'm, clairvoyant. It's really simply common sense and looking at the pattern of history and what they do every time, and how can they spin the same program but in a modern context, and you can almost see their next move. What's scary is we're at that move in World War II where the food's getting cut off to certain populations. Only this time, those certain populations is going to be the whole world, minus the elite, the oligarchs, the billionaires and their staff and their people. But think about this. If you took all of the people in the world and then you got rid of the general population, but you only left the royalty, their family, their friends, their subjects, so to speak, the people that work for them and do things, and then you did the same thing with the billionaires, the oligarchs, and the politicians, and you'd have a very small
population. This is the story of the worst road trip ever. In April of 1846, a man named James Fraser Reed, an Illinois businessman, eager to build a greater fortune in the rich land of California, leads 9 covered wagons out of Springfield, Illinois, on the 2,500-mile journey to California, in what would become one of the greatest tragedies in the history of westward migration. Reed found others seeking to find fortune, adventure, and new beginnings on this perilous trek across the West. Among them was the Donner family. Others like the Graves, Breens, Murphys, Eddies, McCutcheons, Kesebergs, and the Wolfingers would come too. The successful Reed was determined his family would not suffer on the long journey, as his wagon was an extravagant 2-story with a built-in iron stove, spring-cushioned seats, and bunks for sleeping, and 2 hired servants to help with the workload. Reed's 12-year-old Virginia dubbed it the Pioneer Palace Car. Also in the group were the families of George and Jacob Donner. George Donner was a successful 62-year-old farmer who had migrated 5 times before settling in Springfield, Illinois, along with his brother Jacob. Obviously adventurous, the brothers decided to make one last trip to California. At the bottom of Jacob Donner's saddlebag was a copy of Lansford Hastings's Emigrant's Guide, with its tantalizing talk of a faster route to the Garden of the Earth. It's tough, but the going's good. Tamsin Donner writes in her journal, "I could never have believed we could have traveled so far with so little difficulty. Indeed, if we do not experience anything worse, I shall say the trouble is all in getting started, but as leader of the wagon train, Tamsin's husband George Donner is aware there's one final obstacle to their journey, the Sierra Nevada, with peaks up to 14,000 feet. It's known if you fail to clear the mountain passes before the first snow falls, the repercussions and results can be both horrifying and deadly." As the Donner Party approaches Utah, George Donner makes a pivotal flaw in his decision to splinter off from the main party. Hastings Cutoff says it's a fine level road with plenty of water and grass, saving 400 miles. As it turns out, Donner's information is wrong. In fact, the so-called shortcut adds at least 100 miles to the journey. High in the Sierra Nevada, the Donner Party enters the Truckee Pass. They're only 30 miles from the California plains, but supplies are dangerously low, and traveling through the mountains is taking its toll, ending in a broken axle. The Donner Party stops to make repairs, but that night, 5 feet of snow falls. Soon the drifts are 60 feet deep. The Donner Party will be stranded for 5 months. In just 3 weeks, they've eaten all their food. Then they kill their pack animals. Next, they eat charred bones, twigs, bark, leaves, and dirt. Finally, a suggestion was made that were one to die, the rest might live. Cannibalism. On Christmas Day, 1846, a Christmas feast like few others takes place. They devour their first human. Bodies are cut up, flesh labeled so people don't eat their own kin. Later, 4 rescue parties bring out some survivors. The very last finds a man named Ludwig alone. Around him, a scene that haunts us today and will continue to leave a lasting mark in history. Ludwig is surrounded by bones and entrails, a 2-gallon kettle filled to the brim with human blood. Also nearby is George Donner's body, his skull split open, his brain removed. Tamsin Donner's body is never found. It also seems a man named William Foster shot 2 Miwok Native American guides named Lewis and Salvador for food, which is the only instance of anyone in the Donner-Reed party that was murdered and eaten. The rest of the cannibalized were already dead. They took the survivors to Sutter's Fort, California, by the route that is now known as Donner Pass. Stranded in the early snows of the Sierra Nevada mountains, nearly half the travelers died of starvation and illness. Even today, Interstate 80 has to be closed occasionally due to heavy snows and blizzards. Only 45 of the original 81 members of the Donner Party survived. This truly was the worst road trip ever, which reminds us not to be complacent but instead be proactive with our prepping. We don't have to worry about not having food to last. We have My Patriot Supply. And right now, you can save $200 on a 3-month food kit with Adapt 2030. Adapt and stay prepared.
Rumble, thanks for letting us. Up with Brighteon.com. Mike, thank you for allowing us to stream live. Vigilante TV, shout out Jeff. So we have a few different platforms and venues. If you think something like this is worth your time or your money to continue to keep this station on air, Revolution Radio navigation bar right at the top, be able to donate. I mean, look at this different types of. The more people get closer to the truth, the more that they stop the conversation or completely deflect it into the point of it's censored or completely removed off of social media channels now, these discussions. We need to have these discussions more than ever because so many things are changing and it's all on a cycle. So to start into the show tonight, for the second hour right here on Revolution Radio, moving through the October 2024 event where the planets are squaring. Now, Ransom, if you could flip to the next slide where you see that yellow, what looks like, arrowhead that I've put into the solar system there. After we come through that October event, just a few months from now, we're going to swing around in front of the sun in April, which will be spring for our 2025 here in the Northern Hemisphere, spring. Our Earth is going to be in front of the sun, and all the gas giants are going to be directly behind us. And everything electromagnetically and gravitationally is going to get tugged, whatever's in the entire periphery coming into our solar system is just going to get directly dragged through the face of the Earth before it even reaches the sun and before it gets out to Jupiter. And everything's just going to get pulled in one direction, namely to the face of the planet. Think about all the giant meteorites and fireballs and bolides coming through the atmosphere happening right now. And you might think, well, that's strange, but you know what? Let me show you another thing here. July 15th, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, set a record for snow in July. And you might think, what? That's impossible. I thought the same. But even the Philadelphia airport registered snow for July 15th, flurries. But still, it's the first time it ever snowed in July in Philadelphia. Apparently, there was a thunderhead that came through, a hailstorm, and then after that, whatever was causing that feedback loop in the thunderstorm, for that little bit of area behind it, it created conditions so snow fell. Flurries in July. See, the triggers are there, the mechanism, everybody's seeing that, okay, wow, it's really jumped the shark now. There's absolutely no way to disguise and hide this from the rest of the planet any longer. The old narratives we're fed will not work. We're in a different frequency. We're in a different awareness. People are becoming aware. They're seeing, perceiving, and decoding reality in a different way. We're at this point now, all these extremes we're seeing across the planet can't be explained away through the previous narratives. But if you start using electromagnetism and you talk about all these things, is it another way they're going to start scaring people? Sky phenomenon, as I keep hearing all over the place right now. I keep hearing sky phenomena everywhere, and everybody's predictions moving forward. But it would be a sky phenomenon if we had incredible amounts of meteorites and sky debris raining in. And when I say that, fireballs, Brazil, Turkey, giant daylight fireball over New York. Japan had 2. And this is all just in the last week. I mean, daytime visible, giant, very similar to Teleblinsk kind of boom, big exploding, vibrating fireballs when they get in the lower atmosphere. That's the stream of stuff we're coming into, and we're still protected by the sun pretty good. Next year, we'll be completely in front of everything. So put that into context for a second. You know, that crazy hurricane that was so intense so early, that Hurricane Beryl. And here in East Tennessee, we just had the driest first 15 days since 1880, which would be like 140 years. And then we look at Sudan, Lake Victoria, the most rain in 128 years. You know, so those are very close together. Like something that we're looking at definitely is on at least 150-year cycle on this one. But then China gets a full year's worth of rain in one day, which is on the 1,000-year. And then you start looking over different countries and see how much snow and how much rain is coming down in the summer that is just blistering. I mean, blistering the amount of the earth changes that we're seeing with lakes, rivers, dams, landslides, earth cracks. What I'm trying to impart is it's coming to the point of intensity where it can't be hidden any longer, and they're not going to bother. And when I say them, the same controllers are just not going to bother to try to even convince you anymore. They're going to run with all these things happening, forget the narrative. They're going to use it as a fear mechanism because the event, not what could be in the future, 50 years from now, 20 years from now, don't use a plastic straw. I'm talking about immediacy of the event of what you're seeing in the skies above you. Mississippi, Minnesota, Missouri, record floods, you know, I mean, it never stops. The world has come together in agreement that it's a worldwide event with whatever is happening in intensity. So globally, there's no one country not affected where people are not noticing to the intensity point where the old narratives don't work across every nation on the planet. So it has to shift. And that was the whole thing about the next iteration is going to be when these fireballs start getting bigger and more common, especially after October. We're going to swing around the backside of the sun. Right around February, you're going to start to see more. And I do believe as we get into April, around the middle of April, we're going to be the most precisely in front of the sun until we get back around when we come into winter on the backside of the sun. Like you come in with those two events back to back events like that quick. Whatever happens with the electromagnetic field shifting and that'll occur in October, just days before the election. And then shortly after that, there's going to be pelted by an enormous amount of space debris coming in and huge amounts of fireballs, meteorites, these sort of things. And we're going to come right into that at the apex of 2025, April. So again, I come in and I look at it and, you know, we were talking about what Ransom had spun on their same spin program, different era. So how do you keep people distracted when all these things are happening in real time in front of them and they need to question their reality? They need to question their own program and they need to question their bedrock of what they think existence is. Because it's shifting so greatly and so quickly that it's hard to comprehend how big the events are getting in front of us. Same spin cycle, different era to keep the masses distracted during these changes. I don't know, Ransom, take it away, man. I was going somewhere with that, and I think I said the same thing last hour as I was trying to get us in for the intro here.
Right. They want to keep you distracted so much that it's always doomsday. It's always doomsday, right? So when doomsday comes, you're totally unprepared, right? So we need to plan for tomorrow like there is a tomorrow and not worried about if there's not tomorrow. I mean, why would you plan for it if you thought there was going to be no tomorrow? Obviously, there's probably going to be a tomorrow, but what will it look like and will you be prepared for it? That's really everyone's question. And evidently, the message is, getting big. I mean, look at this. Even Costco selling doomsday diners, right? They're selling you some, apocalyptic buckets, right? The apocalyptic buckets.
Hey, that's got a good catchy ring to it, man. A good catchy ring.
I know, right? That's not bad, but it just tells you that
apocalyptic buckets. Yeah. Why didn't I think of that, man?
Right. What's funny about it is it's probably, not not the same organic stuff that you could get somewhere else. But the point being that even the major retailers are going in the direction of maybe you should have some of that. How much of that, and why would they do that? Is that like a weird message? Are they really trying to make money off of it? I mean, because for people that don't think anything's ever going to happen and it's all going to be fine, that's just a novelty. But for people that think, hey, well, maybe it's going to happen, maybe I should have some kind of redundancy backup plans for life, that's a good idea. And I bet they're laughing when they go into Costco and they're buying other supplies that they've already got that taken care of. But the fact that it's becoming even the mainstream outlets. But what's weird about that is what do you think happens if something does happen? Do you think those buckets will still be available? Of course they're not going to be. You remember what happened to the seeds and other stuff, and we weren't even in a shortage. They just didn't want you to buy them, right? So those are non-essential items. Do you think the
hey, with that, if you now, so can I ask a question for everybody out there, and also Ransom for you? Like if you would have shoplifted, or me too, if I would have reached over there and grabbed some seeds and put them in my pocket and walked away, you won't even sell them to me. But I think they're that important for my well-being in my life to actually feed myself that I am willing to steal those seeds. I would gladly pay for them. But if you will not allow to pay for them and you're not really enforcing crime, would that be without the would you care if I reached over and took 5 or 6 or 8 or 10 packs of seeds that I was going to buy so I could get my garden up? Would you fault me for that?
Well, I personally wouldn't, but the Karens would. Speaking of Karens, and this is funny, the Karens would get you, of course, because they're going to hate on you. But I thought this was funny is that the Karens idea has just kind of come up in the last couple of years since early 2020 about people worrying about what garments they might wear or not wear. And then it kind of spread into, basically busybodies that are worried about what you're doing instead of what they're doing. It's so funny to me that the would-be event maker that, made the event for everybody to see on TV got stumbled and spotted out before this entire surveillance state, before the Homeland Security, before the Secret Service, the local police. Some doofus outsmarted all them, but if you look at the footage of those events, there's 20 Karens going, hey, what's that guy doing over there? What's he doing? It totally, if there was such a thing as, a conspiracy going on, I'm not saying that there is, but if there was, isn't it funny that it got mostly ruined by a bunch of MAGA hat Karens that were like, hey, what's going on over there? We need to kind of be a Karen inside. I'm not saying to go, get in people's business or tell them what to do. But inside, you should be thinking, hey, what are they doing? Why are they here? What are they up to? And I mean that about everybody, your neighbors, politicians, people you see at the store. But no, myself, I would be like, oh, well, they're obviously not going to eat those seeds. They're probably going to farm them. So that person knows what's up. But think about that. Where do you think all of these people are going to try to get supplies when there's an actual problem? Because we saw the toilet paper thing. We saw the government's restricting everything. We saw the government's making people change their hours, not have enough customers or staff in the buildings at a certain time. Evidently, they didn't get the memo at that Black Rock property that guy climbed up on. They didn't get the memo there because there was a bunch of people, and this is verified, a bunch of people on the first and second, inside parts of that building there. Somehow they didn't notice, all of the metal roof sounds that are made when you walk around on a metal roof. It's all made for TV. And even when it's real, it's made for TV because, they will put so much disinformation out there that will cause enough arguments that the censorship gets their, reasoning behind censoring things because that's not the story that they agree with. And that's what I was talking about earlier. You're going to have to cut off all outside sensory perception except for an entertainment value only, meaning that all facts, all video, all audio has to be verified and confirmed before you can believe it. You can't believe what you see and hear in real time. You just can't do it. There's always new information. Things are exposed. But speaking of that, BlackRock is getting very famous right now, for a bunch of different reasons, right? So there's all kinds of scandals about what they may or might not be doing, but a lot of people don't know that they are heavily into, guess what? Robotics, and not the kind that's like the cool, walk around with me and tell me I need to take my prescriptions because I'm old and I have dementia. I mean the ones that replace human jobs, factory jobs, customer service jobs. The robot that's just an arm that can not only cook it, package it, but serve it to you and charge you, all with just a QR code with your phone that's attached to your face all the time, because now there's nothing but phone zombies. I watched a video this week of a poor woman that drowned in a pool, and the phone zombies, even in a water area where you wouldn't think that you would bring your phone in there with common sense, people had their nose in their phones, or they were so self-indulged that they didn't notice this woman drowning feet from them. They literally walked by her in a public place, and that shows you about how civilization will be if there is an emergency. Do you think they're going to stop to help you if you get wounded, trampled, or that there's no food for you left at the store? And I hate to tell you, the answer is no. I'm not saying that human nature is not good sometimes, but it seems to be the best when there's resources. And the only way to have resources is to plan ahead and take the future of not only your life, your family's life, your community's life, but your entire country's life into your own hands and plan around these systems. Vote with your dollar. Refuse to participate in stuff where you know that the people that are making money are actually against you, against human life, against farming, against ranching, and the whole human environment that makes us a human being.
Yeah, no food at the store. All right, you prepared. I prepared. My neighbors prepared. Millions of other people across millions of neighborhoods are prepared. But you're going to have those people showing up at your door because either maybe they know you're prepared, or they're just like taking a wild guess, going, hey, I need some food for my kids and me, and we're super hungry. We haven't eaten like 2 or 3 days. Really, I'm super hungry. I'm starting to get headaches. I can't even help. We really need it. And what are you going to do at that point? You're going to have to make choices as to who can stay and who's not welcome, I mean, how many of these people are going to be just wandering around going, I didn't get the food, but obviously enough, it's like enough phone calls, cold calling eventually. Hey, yeah, okay, somebody will talk or give you food. But, there's going to be random wandering, either individuals, families, groups of families. Because, a group of families come up with like 2 fathers or something, and there are 3 fathers, and you're one person, and they're at your house going, we need food for our families. You're like, hey, no, I don't have it, but they can smell it cooking in the stove behind you. And like, no, I can't help you. And then it's like 3 of the dads are going to try to break down the door with their families to get in to get the food. Unless something shifts, unless the mind frame of shifts, or in a different magnetic field, the needs of our body are a little bit different, where we won't need as much food or as much water to sustain ourselves and survive. There's a lot of possibilities. You talk about biblical miracles, etc. Perhaps some of this is rooted into electromagnetic field changes where our bodies actually change. Now, would you notice it, or would you just be in the new field where that was just your waking state? Like, would you have noticed it from the previous? Or would you just be in the state and you wouldn't have noticed that the shift even occurred because you're just here all the time? And as it shifted, that would be your new reality, and you almost wouldn't even remember the prior one because you're just immersed in this newest level of frequency. Because the reason I try to tell you that is, people are going to be doing strange things. They're going to be behaving strangely, and then you're going to have to make choices. But then again, maybe nature helps us, and everything that we're thinking about it never even happens because the way we're able to think, or our bodies, like I say, shifting, not requiring as much input, and perhaps this is all for naught. But I want to say one thing about food storage. Way back in 2019, when I got back to the States, I was like, this COVID thing. Hey, mom and dad and friends and family and everybody out there, sister and anybody else who will listen, this COVID thing is going to absolutely wipe out the planet. Now, this is before it was here in America. I was over flew through Xi'an as this thing was kicking off. And we were in Europe, and we saw it getting bigger and bigger, and they canceled our flights back through China, and we knew it was the real deal. So anyway, I get home back to the States, and I said, this thing is going to be super crazy. Y'all need to get prepared. And, of course, everybody's smugness. Oh, no, America has the best medical system on the planet. That'll never happen. And sure enough, whoosh, the tidal wave came. All right, so I bought a bunch of storable foods at that time, and I started to put it in 5-gallon buckets. Just like what you could see as what do you call that, an apocalyptic bucket?
Apocalyptic I made my own buckets.
Yeah, I made my own. I went out and got like handy wipes, and I got little, things of chlorine bleach in bottles, and there was food and lighters and candles and all kind of stuff for each one. So if you needed to grab one as an individual, you could take off with it. There was a couple rounds of silver in it. There was a couple lighters in it, candles, like I say, no alcohol or anything, but just like dry foods that if you had water, like there were beans in there. There's a tin of rice and like some fish and like canned fish, tin fish thing, whole bunch of different stuff, spices and little jars of salt, pepper. But anyway, I put it all together. And then just for fun, is what I'm trying to do a video on, is opening it up and seeing. Now, I open it up, and because I'd put wet and dry stuff together, thinking that, well, those plastic packaging, that's going to last and seal that moisture in there. Nope. After many years, the plastic did not seal the moisture in, and everything is just, I lost all the barrels. Even the lighters were too like oxidized to even use the lighters any longer. So sometimes when you have something that is already preset, so where I was going with the point was, and I had my buddy look at it, and I said, this is crazy. Like, how did all this stuff leak through? It's in bottles, like, but he's in the sciences and robotics, and he was like, well, your barrier, your plastic barrier, whatever that container is that contains your thing, whether it be bleach or some kind of cleaning solution or dishwashing soap or any kind of handy wipes or whatever it is, that barrier is there, but it eventually will go through. It's only a containment barrier for a certain amount of time. It's like after a certain amount of time, it's 100% leakage through these different like plastics and things. So learning that, only putting your dry stuff with your dry stuff, that's it. Wet stuff goes with wet stuff, dry goes with dry. If you can't separate those two, you can't put them together. So even the simplest of those kind of mistakes that people would make along the way of their journey of learning what to do. There's a lot of spoiled stuff out there that people think they've set aside. That's why you need to rotate your things through. You need to practice with it, cook at it, take an inventory of what you have. And, going back to those buckets, it was a travesty to see how poorly educated I was when I was trying to put those together in a hurry, thinking that it would be used. But see, here's the thing. At that point, when the vid swept America, I thought this was going to be a very speedy event where we would start to use those, that the supply chains would break down much, much quicker than I anticipated. And they didn't break down completely. They still stayed together with baling wire and duct tape. But still, it held enough so there weren't famines and shortages through the United States where you would need the emergency buckets. But I'm really wondering, when this next time, if it's planned to be on purpose. But please be careful. From my own experience, dry bulk goods go with dry bulk goods only. No questions asked. You do not compromise, not 1%. 0.25%, no. So learn from the mistakes of others, and if that's your easiest way, if you can't put a bucket together, think about buying something that's already ready, that's packaged properly, 25-year storage life. I mean, I looked at my buckets that I put together. Beans are good, rice is still good, and all the tinned things were good for, multiple years anyway. Salt's always good. So I would say without the water damage and the leakage of the chlorine and things inside there, all the food stuff pretty much would be good still. But with all the damage in there from all the water and leaking like hand wipes and like say leaking cleaning fluid, everything leaked. If it was liquid, it leaked, promise you. So anyway, there's easier ways to do things. Now, would you give one of those known ruined storage buckets to people that were begging on your front door and go, here, this is all we have, and then make them leave, and then they get a bucket full of, they get the 2 rounds of silver out of there, I guess. That'd be good for them, but I don't know, man. I was going somewhere with that, trying to connect some ideas, but I didn't take enough notes.
Well, I don't think you were wrong for thinking that something was going to happen. It was obviously some kind of, in my opinion, beta run. And, that event may not be over yet. You've seen a lot of stuff. It's only been, a couple of years. And look at all the changes that did happen because of that. I think that was more like a near miss that you experienced there. It could have been bad. You could have been stuck there. And not only that, I've always thought this was funny about people that argue about that. The idea, well, look, haha, nothing happened, well, when it does, what if you just go poor? What if you just go broke? What if all kinds of ifs that could happen? I don't know about you, but I like having the items I have, like even down to my pockets. I have certain items I always have with me. Maybe nothing will ever happen to me, no emergency, and I'll never actually need any of those things. But a frisky young man that has a protection there. He wants to use it. He might not get to use it, but he'll be happy that he has it if he has to use it. And that goes for everything. Like I have a pocket flashlight. I have a knife in my pocket. I always have a lighter. I always have a backup knife, not just the one that, the main one I have, but I always have a backup knife. Whenever I travel, I always have enough tools to work on my vehicle while I'm gone. So no matter what, I will at least have a chance to do something. And I've been living my life like that almost always. Have I ever regretted preparing ahead? No. So if anything, does happen, which to me, it's not if, it's a when. Something will happen. Empires fail. Now, whether or not I'm alive for it, or it's my kids or their grandkids that got taught in a certain way, and they happen to survive an event because, you showed them what and how to do it in case it happens. I don't think that you would, go to the grave feeling bad about that at all. I thought that was funny there. I was watching that speech by the vice presidential candidate, and he was talking about how his when his grandma died, there was like 90 guns or something like that around her house. Right, because she got old and she liked to feel safe and make sure that she was going to be safe, and she realized that she didn't have the good mobility anymore. So instead of worrying about running back to her self-defense mechanism, she just, made sure there was one in arm's length. And I don't think that's any weird, like you were talking about the buckets. I literally do that with go bags. I have a go bag different for different scenarios. Like I take one with me traveling that has anything I need to live in the woods or, deal with weather. Because that's the most likely thing that I'll have to deal with. And those things have come in handy for me. There was Snowmageddon back in 2016 where like half the East Coast was covered in snow and you couldn't drive anywhere. And I was walking around in my Gore-Tex, literally sweating inside, opening it up to cool off in the middle of a blizzard. Same thing when the hurricane rolled through. I'm walking around and I realized if I, as long as I didn't get hit by any debris or falling trees, I'm totally comfortable in my personal Gore-Tex tent. Thank God for the military inventions or whoever invented that. Right. So I've never once been like sad or I had a regret about planning for the future ever. That's never happened. And I would think it would be the same thing with, backing up light, backing up water, and backing up food. And, God forbid we go into a scenario like that. But weirdly enough, coincidentally enough, all of the science fiction programs and entertainment for the last 40 years, if not longer, and at least like I'm going to say a tenth of the articles for the last 40 years have been about how apocalyptic changes might happen. Now, is it fear-mongering? I don't really think so. When you're saying things that are unrealistic, maybe. But if you're saying things that are just, down to earth, like, hey, if you live by an area that has tornadoes, you might want to have storable foods, a way to clean water, some backup clothes buried or, put somewhere, or an alternate location to move to in case, like if you had the money, wouldn't it be nice to have two houses that are in two different areas? So if something happens, you always have this idea that you could bug out to the other location and maybe it's better. But, even if it's not a place that you were going to, wouldn't you feel better? And this is the main thing that all survival experts agree on. Clarity of mind and calmness and the ability to deal with your situation is the reason that almost all people survive extraordinary circumstances. In other words, if you are comfortable, your brain works. And if your brain works, you have a lot better chance of survival for not just you, but everybody around you. And then that gets into the community, right? So if you're level-headed, you're prepared, and you have a friend nearby that's also level-headed and prepared, or a community, like you actually know your neighbors and they're all pretty cool, which is rare, but it does happen. You have a great place, foundation, if anything happens. And think about this. What if something did happen to the grid that took a year where you live to come back on? Wouldn't you be happy that you had food, that you didn't really have to cook so much to survive while everybody else is having strife and having to go to the FEMA tents or the emergency responders charity tents for water and food? That's just not a good idea. I don't want to be in that line. I don't want to go to the FEMA camp for free Wi-Fi. I don't want to go for the soup kitchen of the digital world. I want to be able to have at least the choice to bunker down or to bug out. And that's what it boils down to. So it doesn't matter what happens, a communist revolution, a super flare from the sun, a meteorite that impacts the earth and changes everything, 3 or 4 volcanoes going off in the same year, like 539 AD or something like that. And what else happened in 79 AD? There's a lot of factors that led to that. But if we just go 500 years to the future at the worst year ever there in that era, millions upon millions of people starved everywhere. Everywhere people were doing bad. And if it happened then in relatively recent history, then of course the possibility exists that any number of triggers could have that happen now. So, it's kind of like your choice if you want to be up creek and just live with the universe and flow through it how it comes. Maybe you'll luck out at the end, or at least have some redundancy backup plans just for yourself, your children, and your family, and maybe even community if you have it that organized.
I was trying to throw into Grok while you were talking there. Give me the top 20 events that occurred from 0 year up to 50, the year 50 AD, Anno Domini, in the year of our Lord. To see what the top events would be using Grok versus other types of search engines to see what it would push us toward. Because if you're looking for another sign, because I'm trying to do this as a video and I have so many windows open, so I'm just kind of clicking through them. Here's another one. We're going to see a supernova coming up that will be visible to the naked eye, where you're going to see a massive star in the middle of our night sky glow and become a huge white dot in the middle of the sky, and then whoosh, it'll just vanish. So if you're looking at something like this, called Coronae Borealis, TCRB as in boy. It seems to be on a pulse wave as well. And here's the interesting thing. The last time it was seen was 1217 AD. And here we are again. So you can't tell me that there's this many cycles coming on. And it's also interlooped with a 80-year cycle, which is also that 4 turning cycle. So I'm wondering if these are all related. If we have an 80-year cycle of what they consider like stable flashes, but then in 1217, it was like, whoa, it was the biggest one they'd ever seen. And again, you're talking about Chinese stargazers, you're talking about Arabian stargazers, vast quantities of time of people stargazing and noticing the cycle of this. But the previous iteration, they don't go any further back. Like if it was seen in 1217, would it not 1200 years? There would be just, a little bit before the birth of Christ? Should have been seen then, what, in the Greek era? We have to go back to Chinese records again to start looking up for some of these, astrological things. They catalog them pretty good because they believe that comets coming through are bad luck. It's a bad omen when comets come through. So they're always looking to look at the heavens, and also with the Big Dipper. For those of you that didn't know, it's called Beidou Qixing, and it's called the cult of the Big Dipper. It's another esoteric belief system coming out of China, well above the families. These are the actual seers of the skies that then tell the political class or the moneyed family class, the dragon class, what is happening in the heavens. The seed point for human consciousness comes from the Big Dipper, according to the most ancient of beliefs of Japan and China. Something about that star system, it seems like it's the Berkey current that powers our star. So that knowledge have been known that current flow comes from the Big Dipper, and it intersects with our star, and we're getting that same Berkey current electrified flow to allow our star to have its light and to give us a plentifully warm planet to grow food on. They understood these things are linked, and when the cycles change, what on earth changes also. Well, the emperor loses the mandate in heaven. They lose the ability or the dictate, the mandate to rule over the people. They couldn't even grow food. Got massive storms. So if you look back in the past, like what is occurring in China right now, the mandate from heaven has absolutely been removed from the leaders. But through power, they are trying to hold on with the way they do. Power struggle. It's always been, always will be. But for this the corona to start blasting a bright nova in our skies just weeks from now, with all of this other silliness that seems to be happening, that's bending the mind, bending the emotions, tweaking your reality. So look for this one. It's supposed to increase 1 whole degree of arc. So you got to think about going around your periphery at night, 360 degrees. So this thing is going to go from a pinprick in the sky to a full degree of bright. There'll be something there, and then there'll be nothing, and then whoosh, there'll be something giant in the sky. So how are we going to integrate this in? Another sign in the heavens. I mean, how many points do we have to look at to see that this fits a lot of, okay, that checks all the boxes. Yes, extremes. That checks on the cycles. Yeah, the 80-year cycle, the 1,200-year cycle, the 1,000-year cycle, check. Okay. It's cited at the same time. Oh, wait, we're in a grand solar minimum cycle, 400 years, check. Squaring planets. Okay, 79 AD, 2,000-year cycle, check. And then we go through the Hunga Tonga eruption, the biggest eruption in 200 years. Okay, that sits in there. But the amount of water vapor is the most ever recorded in human history going into the atmosphere from an eruption. Okay, check. That's a big one. Multi-thousand of these giant daytime fireballs coming through right now. Check. Earth cracks across the planet. Check. All of our infrastructure collapsing from the railroads to the dams, because the Earth's crust is starting to morph, bend, pull, and become plious. Check. All right, these are all the things in play. How many people have seen the cycle? How do you get prepared for it, though? Because there's a couple ways you look at it. All right, so that's all the base information of we know it's here, it's in play. Now, what's the solution for that? That should be more of the question is, okay, we've identified the problem pretty cleanly. We see all the change. And the change is, well, the change is here because the problem's behind it. We see that problem's here now. Greatest opportunity in human history. Stuttered there for a second. How are you going to implement some of these solutions? Because Ransom, he hit it cleanly. If you're even remotely partially organized, you should be able to get through this without being pushed in and you're back against the wall in an extreme poverty situation or extreme lack of food where you're going to then do anything you can or have to get into a place that'll give you food. Which way does the world spin from here? Now, how do you take those solutions and then offer them to the greater public, quote unquote, the masses, so we can start implementing some of these solutions? It might be different for everybody. So, I don't know. There's so many possibilities for storing foods, drying foods, canning foods, growing foods, trading foods, that it's really unlimited. Now, how do you get that area set up to be able to barter before the event, so you learn how to break change for a 1 ounce silver round? Or maybe I said this before in a show. I had a friend of mine, Kevin, and we were talking, and Ryan too, and we're like, hey, what if you got a 1 ounce silver round? How are you going to break that and make change for it? So we started having these conversations in the barter situation, all right? So you got to realize this could be a possible solution in the interim between systems. So you got a 1 ounce round. Okay, I got 20 war nickels of 0.05 ounce. So 20 of the war nickels from, say, 1943 to 1945, where there was silver in the nickel, would be equal to one whole silver dollar, and you could break change that way. Or you could use a pre-1964 quarter. 5 of those is about equal to an ounce. What about the mercury dimes? How are you going to break in anything? We're talking about strict silver to silver trading, but you need to have change for that. Half ounce rounds, quarter ounce rounds, but those things are really, 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 really expensive with their with the premiums. So do you have a blowtorch and a scale where you can actually, melt those metals down and put them into an ingot form and be able to clip that off to the perfect amount of weight and then be able to mark that weight on a bar that you poured yourself? And there's going to be a lot of solutions, and a lot of things are going to go away, and I agree AI will be there and it's going to go. But there's going to be a huge amount of human implemented solutions that are going to precede that full takeover and 100% out there labor force of the AI. We're going to go through this dip down through these cycles first before we come back out and that AI starts to take over. Could it be done during the actual flip that we're experiencing right now between two worlds? Yes and no. I mean, yes, because during that time of so much chaos, a new system could come up. But see, we're against human learning at that same time. The humans who would need to learn that just to even have those machines to exist themselves, a lot of people don't have the time or energy to learn all this new AI tech that goes with it. But there has to be enough people on the planet that understand it so the AI tech can continue to run with development. There's no way it can just come to this point and then, okay, that's it, and took away all the humans, and then it can exist without and then just develop itself. There's a symbiosis. Human input is still needed into the system. But what's way outside that is you trading with somebody an ounce of silver, breaking down some old pre-64 change, doing your sale, or trading or swapping or bartering, but no AI involved in that. It's just off-chain vegetables, for an example. I mean, AI has its uses, but a lot. I was looking at this chart today, and only 20% of corporations have adopted, or companies have adopted, usage of AI inside their businesses so far. But the way it's on the news, like 100% of businesses have implemented it, and it's just everywhere. It's all encompassing. It's rolled over us already, but it seems like it's so complex for a lot. It's so new for so many, they don't understand the concept, and they're just all burnt out and they don't want to learn it. They've already spent their entire life chasing down QuickBooks, chasing down Excel sheets, chasing down XYZ programs, the new CRM management, just whatever it is. So many people had to learn so many systems so far just to keep up with that. And now we're coming into AI and they're like, no, we're not going to do it again. So it seems there's a disconnect between, the human manpower so far to get this to implement to 100%, where everybody understands, everybody will accept it, and everybody will integrate with it. We are 80% away from that. 80. But the news would have you believe that we're near 100%. This is another mind bender right here. Yeah, it exists. The plan is to put everybody out of work. The plan is to take over the world with AI. But that is definitely not where we sit in the physical reality as of this day today. So again, the news has made you paint the picture for them of what the world is, and you're in the own belief system wrapped back into it, even though it's not even remotely close to where that is yet. But the story's scripted for you to get your mind to make and create the reality for it, to let you believe that that reality is already created. I don't know. Again, then we're back into that loop again, like you talked. Same spin, different era.
The AI is absolutely like that. That's kind of why, I don't freak out too bad about the reset, because I know that they're not there yet. It's in the process. They're hammering it. It's coming in. It's happening right now. I'm not disputing that. But what the problem is that their AI systems are mess ups. And they're trying to give the keys to the AI before it's like a grown up. It's basically in an infant stage still, where it gets things wrong. I remember I forget which one it was telling people to drink pee. Chat GPT, I think. It was telling them all kinds of bad information. Matter of fact, right here, there's an article about Elon Musk. He wants to give Grok power of the news feed. The problem with it, too, is sometimes it makes a lot of mistakes. So even when you're getting into the digital art and all of that stuff, you were never going to see a unique image or a unique creation from AI, because all it does is sources all of the input human beings have given it, as far as pictures, ideas, stories, plots, languages, everything. Everything is fed into it. It does a good job of reflecting back at us things that we see, and I think that's why so many people are impressed with it. But they're never going to get to the point of having the AI a mastermind of everything. Now, it does good with analytical things that it doesn't have to use creativity. And basically that means that AI would lose eventually against a biological mind. A biological mind would find the loophole in its logic, and eventually it would have a fault. But if you combine these ideas, which is what they're doing, which is what they're pushing, there won't be that imbalance anymore. They will get the creativity power right out of the human mind, which means that we probably won't have control of it at that point. But in order to get there, they have to continue to program everything and get better. And the problem with that is that these topics are exponentially growing. They exponentially update, upgrade, and become new models. So not only are the people working on it, but the AI itself is working on it. So the people are finding the flaws, and the AI is getting better at identifying that. So what you've seen in the past 5 years is nothing that you'll see in the next year. And then after it increases fast for that year, it'll be 6 months, then 2 months, and then almost like in the Bible, where they talk about information being able to be doubled every day. Here we are. We're at that pinnacle right now. And the question is where do we go? Because we still have one hand on the steering wheel. We have a little bit of control of what happens, and that's kind of what I was talking about before. But we might have to get used to doing a new lifestyle. That might be a reality for us. And that's kind of why I was going to bring up this this article.
Give me your autograph, Ransom. You're famous.
Right. This article that's talking about the 7 health benefits of cold showers. Right. It's just a pretty simple thing, but it's part of that knowledge base that everybody should kind of have. It talks about how it boosts your immune system. It enhances mental health, improves your skin and hair, etc. But there's a bunch of these things that you could be doing. And, at the same time, what's ironic is here's a article right next to it that I had lined up. More than 300 people suspected heat-related deaths under investigation in Phoenix area because the temperature reached 118 degrees. Now, I'm almost going to bet you money that this is another prediction come true. And what I mean by that is I talked about probably last year or the year before, that whenever you have an increase in migrants going into an area, if they're not acclimated to the area or not prepared mentally with no know-how of how things go, you're going to die. So if you're hiding out in the desert and it's 118 degrees and you don't have access to water, guess what? You die. Especially if you're not used to this kind of weather. Like, I think I could last a lot longer than most people without water, only because I grew up here, only because I've experienced it. I'm not going to panic. I'm not going to freak out. I'm not going to overexert myself. But people yearly come to where I live. They die of heat stroke. Tourists do. People that visit, they die of heat stroke. It's not even that hot. It's like 98 degrees out here, or it might get up to 105 where I live, 110 if it's being really extreme, right? But they die. They die because they're not hydrated. They die because they don't know the environment. They die because they're ignorant about how to behave in the situation. And this is kind of what this is. And the same thing goes for everybody everywhere. Guess what happens when the power goes out? There's millions of people in that same scenario. They're not used to the outside. They don't know how to function when it's cold for long periods of time or hot for long periods of time. But guess what? Everybody used to live outside. Everybody for the entire history of mankind has lived outside. And guess what? I hate to break it to you guys. It's been way, way hotter in the human past. We've dealt with way stronger extremes than anything you're seeing right now. I mean, yes, in relative history, you might see some extremes, but nothing like things that people have dealt with in the past. So we know the human can do it. The question is how many of you out there, like in the world, are going to be able to go through that? And here's a small microcosm of the whole thing. 300 people suspected dead and heat related, and I'm going to bet that the majority of them are homeless or they're migrants that just got here. And, that's sad that happens. And right near where I live, they're finding people almost daily dead along the border from heat exhaustion, malnutrition. They weren't ready. They weren't prepared. And it's not like it's that bad outside. So you imagine what's going to happen in the near future if any kind of supply chain disruption happens to Europe or the northern part of the United States where it actually gets cold. You're going to see some problems, which we already, see whenever there's extremes. I remember, I forget how long ago, but there was a heat wave in the Midwest when I was younger, probably a teenager. And I remember hearing about all these old people dying when it was only and I kept thinking, it's only like 89, 90 degrees. Why are they dying? And I couldn't figure it out. And then, part of it's because they were used to living with air conditioning for one, or fans, and then the power goes out. But the biggest cause was the extreme temperature that never dropped below a certain degree. So in other words, it was hot all day. And then at nighttime, it didn't cool off. So they were hot all night. And then when you get into a week of this stagnant temperature, the human body doesn't do so well. And that kind of leads me back to this resources thing. Do you need cold showers? I hate to tell you, but when you're almost freezing to death and you've been working outside in the cold all day, the best thing you could possibly do is have a hot shower, right? It's a total healthcare remedy. It makes you feel better. Your bones stop hurting. You get back to a core temperature. Well, the same is true for the opposite direction. If you're, super hot, a cold shower can straight up reset everything. And these are the kind of tricks and things that may be lifesavers to people if they can remember that when they get in these extreme situations. I believe there are still people out of power in Houston right now from the hurricane that rolled through. And guess what? The bad hurricane season ain't coming till fall, right? Fall is when we get all the named storms. Fall is when all the big storms come in. And we already had this big one early in the year. That's not, totally bizarre, but what's bizarre is that our own government and local people don't tell people, hey, maybe you should have some food buckets. Hey, maybe you should have something that cleans water. Hey, maybe you should plan on not having electricity. Maybe you should plan on not having computer-controlled climate control. And I'm guilty myself. In the summer, I get my air conditioner working. I like it inside, but every time I go outside, I remember this reality. Oh, yeah, it's horrible out here. And what if the power was out? What if I was broke? What if I didn't have any resources like I've had that situation other times in my life? And I think, you know what, this would be a life-threatening situation, or could be for someone older, vulnerable, or not from the area. So no matter where you live, you need to be prepared for your environment, but not just that. Be prepared for your environment to change.
And that is good advice for everybody. Be on the fly, be on your toes, ready to pivot. And please remember, we're pivoting as well. We're going to be rebranding here to Civilization Cycle, this podcast. But join us for the show notes. We're going to put this in 7 or 8 bullet points of what we spoke about tonight so you can start intelligent conversations with others and see how they feel and what their solutions are. Head right over to oilseedcrops.org. Click on that nav bar at the top where it says MIAC show notes and enter your email. We'll get that off to you. That's oil, like one barrel of oil, OIL, seed, like one seed we plant in the ground, and then crops, plural, CROPS. We harvest our crops every year. That's .org because I was studying plantation management and how to use oil seeds as the byproduct of whatever the process was for fruits or nuts. If you have the show notes, you can remember and you can do more research yourself. But a lot of people are looking for conversation starters these days and are willing to have these conversations. So think about having something at your hand that you can write notes on or share what you think the world's happening with others, especially these dates in October coming up and also in April of this year, next year, 2025. David DuByne, Ransom Godwin, signing off. See you next week.
Thank you for listening to